Sir Ken Robinson is here. He is a leading thinker in the development of creativity, innovation, and human potential. His 2006 TED Talk about schools killing creativity is the most viewed TED Talk in the organization's history. My God. Here is a look.
Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original. If you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies this, by the way. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. And the result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. Picasso once said this. He said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it.
Robinson's new book is called Finding Your Element, How to Discover Your Talents and Passions and Transform Your Life. I'm very pleased to have Sir Ken Robinson at this table. Welcome.
Pleasure.
It's great to have you here.
It's really great to be here. Thank you.
So much to ask. I start with, first of all, just explain yourself there, sir. If you're not prepared to fail, you're not prepared to be creative.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that if you make mistakes, that's infallibly a creative thing to do. But
or don't set out to make mistakes.
No, but every creative process has dead ends, false starts, and may take you down a path that's unproductive. A friend of mine won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. I emphasize that I did not, but he did.
Well, yes.
And I asked him how many of his experiments failed. And he said probably 90% of them.
Yeah.
He said,
is that trial and error or more?
Yeah, he said, it's not really, failure's not the right word. He said, what you're finding out is what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you see that if people are composing music, if they're writing scripts, if they're designing buildings, you very rarely get it right the first time.
Yeah.
So if you're stigmatized for getting it wrong, it's a big deterrent.
I mean, you just see that. It's the way life is.
Yes.
Because you can't know everything, and you can't. And if you're not prepared to go that way, then you will not find anything that's worth finding.
Yes, I think that's generally true as well about how people conduct their own lives.
Yeah.
It's why I argue that creativity is fundamental, because we create our own life, and you can recreate it.
Does life beat it out of us?
It does sometimes. There's no question of it. I think people can sometimes get so worn down into their own groove, they think there's no alternative to it. Yeah. Well, Polanyi, the philosopher, talked about that, about the intellectual passions of science.
Right.
And I was talking years ago to a mathematician, and I asked him how you would assess a PhD in pure math. I mean, I'd never seen such a thing. I mean, I used to supervise doctoral programs in the humanities, but math wasn't my strong suit. And I said, now, how would you assess one? A PhD in pure math. I said, presumably it's right. I mean, you'd be fairly depressed, wouldn't you, if you spend 5 years doing a PhD in pure math? It comes back wrong.
Right.
See me. And
or goodbye.
He said, no, they're normally right. But he said there are two criteria for mathematics. He said the first of them is originality. Yeah. Whether or not it breaks new ground in its field. And that's the point about creativity. People often say, you can't assess creativity. Well, it's simply not true. But what you have to understand, I say to them, is that you can't be creative unless you're doing something. And therefore you apply the criteria of originality that are relevant to what it is you're doing. So if you're looking at a PhD in pure math, you're not trying to judge it against the criteria that might apply to haute cuisine. It's about its field.
Right.
And so you look at that. And does it count as an original contribution? So he said originality, it's how creative it is. Not fanciful, but how much it breaks new ground. But the second thing I loved, he said it's aesthetic.
It has an aesthetic.
Yes, I said, why does that matter? He said it's the beauty of the proof.
Right.
I said, why does that matter? He said, because mathematicians have a very powerful belief that mathematics is one of the purest ways we have of describing the truths of nature.
Right.
And since nature is inherently beautiful, the intuition is that the more elegant the proof, the more likely it is to be true.
And I've often said or believed or asked this question, is there some similarity between math and music?
Yes.
Looking for some beautiful, perfect sound.
Yes.
Or looking for a perfect, beautiful formula that in its aesthetic is so pristine and beautiful in the way it defines something.
Well,
whether it's love for music or whether it's an answer in math.
Well, I think the exact parallel. He could be talking about a sonata or a poem or a dance or a building. I remember following this question up with him. I said, so why do you think people struggle with mathematics? And it was a very interesting answer. He said it's a linguistic problem.
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean? He said, they don't speak math. Yeah. And what he meant was, I mean, my French is kind of all right. I mean, I wouldn't have sat down and debated with Proust for very long, you know, but I mean, but I can order a croissant and get one.
That'll get you a long way. Well, that's,
and actually get one, which is more to the point, without gravy on it. So,
if your French is that good, a good one.
It's pretty good. Yeah. A nice one, yes, without potato chips with it. Right. But he said that, you know, that if you, I think music is a good parallel with this. If you don't read music, I mean, notation, if you don't really read it, when you're given a page full of music, what you see is a puzzle. It's a visual puzzle. You think, and you're trying to figure it out. Like it's a form of illiteracy. You can't decode it. But a musician who is fluent in music sees a page of notation and they hear a symphony. You know, the notation is translucent. It takes them straight to the music. And it's the same with mathematics. I mean, most people look at mathematical formulae and they scratch their heads because they're not really fluent. They have phrasebook math. You know, it's like my Proust. But a mathematician who's versed in mathematics will look at it and hear a symphony. They'll see straight through the notation to this world of ideas that it helps to conjure up and to make sense of. And I love that because it speaks to the unity of how we think and create.